Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 17th episode of Myths, Mysteries, and Majesty. This is probably one of the weirdest seasons of the whole podcast since we've been dealing with so many problems lately on the podcast. We went for the first time ever of not recording for a whole week because we had problems with postponing the episode. So many issues we had to deal with. And if I'll be a superstitious person, I would think that there is something behind it. And even tonight, when we're planning this episode, Shaun and myself, we had thunderstorm and severe weather and heavy rain, so we had to postpone for an hour and a half. But still, we're here, tired but thankful that God can still use our weaknesses and very weird circumstances for His own glory, and that despite everything, we can also have fun and enjoy some of the vague and fringe topics that not every Christian is willing to talk and dissect. Shaun, welcome back for the, I don't know, 100th time so far. How are you doing tonight?
Pretty good. Pretty good. I'm glad we're not getting the thunderstorms you're getting in Chicago. But yeah, it's warm here. And yeah, like you said, just a bunch of weird stuff. It's not just weird podcasts, it's or weird stuff in the podcast. It's a weird podcast as a whole.
Everything is weird about this podcast, but
Everything
praise
is
God.
weird.
Okay, so for people
Practically
who've
weird.
been following the channel for a while, they know, well, at least I would expect them to know that for the last weekend, we had a scheduled episode with this famous Russian author, deacon, uh, teacher, seminary grad from Orthodox School of Divinity, a man with so many titles, very prolific in his serving to the body of Christ and God Himself. But because, unfortunate things happen, we had to cancel that episode for now. And I'm just thankful that Shaun, again, you found time for the audience and myself. So, in the good spirit of all of our eerie encounter eyewitness reports that we usually dissect and try, even though we have so much fun, we also try to dissect these stories through biblical lenses and somehow point both Christians and non-Christians to Christ, how they should um, act and react in certain situations when they're dealing with the paranormal. And that being said, for tonight, we have about 5 stories for you guys where they're publicly available. They belong to the public domain. So we'll be just reading on some of them and commenting, and hopefully you guys will experience some goosebumps as I did when I was reading them a couple of nights ago, but also that we'll all have fun and somehow try to see how the biblical worldview can work with the paranormal. Okay, so the first story for tonight, I think, is the last scary, if I can put it that way, but it's still very interesting. And Shaun, at the end of this story that I can read, I have a question for you. So just be ready with a question. Okay, so the story goes like this. When I was in high school, my uncle would throw me a couple bucks to help babysit his kids with my aunt. They lived in a 2-story house by the water, a nice area. The kids were about 3 and 6 years old. One day I was sitting in their den on my phone when I started to hear a baby crying. Thinking it was the 3-year-old, I headed to the bottom of the stairs to check and see if my aunt was up there dealing with it. I called for her a couple times, but no response. The baby kept crying. I called for her one more time, and when I got no response, I started walking up the stairs. Yeah, this is already unusual. I won't say necessarily weird, because the aunt could have been in the washroom or maybe cooking or whatever. But this is already getting weird when you see that the baby's crying, and usually when you have you know, an infant or a child with that age, even though a parent is busy, they should always be around the child, especially when the child is crying for so many times. The parent would usually hear it and come back to take care of the baby. So we already see here that something is getting wrong from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Okay. So it says, I called for her one more time. And when I got no response, I started walking up the stairs. Then I heard my cousins and aunt playing outside. Okay, Shaun. Okay, I'll just stop after this first paragraph. So we have this scenario, we have this story, this house where a person is babysitting, and the kid that is supposedly 3 years old is crying. But then when the person goes upstairs to check, there's no cry, and the child is outside. I'm starting immediately to think about doppelgangers or something. Well, there can be a couple of different schools of thought. What would be when demons are trying to impersonate a human person that died, right? So they would impersonate the person or their ghost, so to speak, and try to deceive their family members. So I'm thinking it could be either a doppelganger, like a spiritual entity that is basically and literally looking like the person is trying to impersonate, or it could be maybe someone for a second, even though he didn't take the shape of and the form of the person he tries to impersonate and duplicate, maybe just trying to deceive someone by mimicking. What would be your thought when it comes to just this first paragraph?
So I like either of those, but if I can throw a crazy one in there, what if this is this person experiencing a disembodied sound that's coming to them from out of time? So perhaps this is like in some places you'll see an echo. So like a cry of, uh, I people normally just kind of see apparitions, and they associate that like with it being oh, what's it called, the stone tape theory, that that like buildings hold on to this energy, and it's not sentient, so it's not a ghost. It's just this event that happened, and for whatever reason, at whatever times, according to God's providence, it just kind of replays in a sense that we would be aware of it. Another one, another possibility is that this could be something that was a premonition to this babysitter that God gave of something that was going to happen in the future that they're not yet privy to. I know one example, I had recently heard a story of a lady who had heard a message, but it was her own voice saying the message, and it had stuck with her. And 2 weeks later, as she was talking to a friend, not in that context, she said those exact words that she had heard in the exact phrasing that she had heard them. And so it immediately clicked, and she became hyper aware of her situation. And she was wondering why God would give that message to her, or allow that message to be carried through time, back to, when she didn't need it. But it allowed her to become hyper vigilant and aware of the situation. And so I'm not really sure how that played out. I don't know if she ever connected the dots, but it was just really interesting that this was something that happened. So although I do like the theory of, it could be a demon attempting to seduce somebody away from, or to hurt them, or a doppelganger. I really like the doppelganger theory, just because it's so creepy that there could be another you out there. But my other two theories, I think, are pretty weird too.
I love them. One of the reasons why I like doing these stories with you is because your mind always comes up with theories and points of view that I wouldn't think of, and that's how we can come up together with all these different insane theories. But there's so much fun when you do it with someone else. You know what I wanted to ask you? Your first theory. Do you think it's almost like something like echoing in time that is just showing? And of course, we know from the Bible that God is sovereign, right? Even though we do this creepy, weird stuff, we always give God the full glory, and we acknowledge the supremacy of Christ in everything, including in all this weird paranormal stuff, which, of course, we never say we believe them 100%. They happen because we don't know, right?
Right.
But let's say it happened. And because God is so sovereign, if there will be an echo time that God allows this, let's say that event already happened, and there are new tenants of that house, and this case keeps happening, not to scare the tenants, but maybe as an echo time, so that maybe the baby will get its own voice. I'm just saying. I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm just coming up with so many theories that they just cross my mind. Or maybe that it can be a warning for the next child. Hey, like maybe if this happened to this child, be aware of your children, or of your child. Or it could be something like like the Cain and Abel, like this the innocent blood is screaming from the earth and crying out to God, almost asking for vengeance and for justice. So in this way, it could be something like that. But I'm also thinking, but then why would God, if it's this, of course, everything is under God's control, but let's say God is involved in this. So I'm thinking, but why would God allow something like this? What would be his point? Because we believe as people of God, right? By reading the Bible, that children who die young immediately go in the arms of the Father, right?
Mhm.
There's no purgatory for them. There's no hell for them. They're saved. Children are saved and going to the Father. So if the child is saved and safe now in the arms of our loving Father, what will be the point if God is controlling and allowing maybe that echo coming as a scream of a baby to come and being seen or heard in this family? What will be the point? Because the baby's already safe and living in the eternal now, in the Father, in another realm. So for me, when I was reading the story that a few nights ago, that thought crossed my mind. I'm like, I want to ask what he thinks about this. Like, if this would be God's will, why would he do it? Because the baby's already safe and sound.
So I think in our post-enlightenment materialistic culture, we tend to see structures as neutral. And so the things that happen there just happen there. But that's not the way the Bible views these things, right? So, it's interesting with leprosy, right? When it's talking about this in Leviticus, there's rules to determine if your house has leprosy. And if your house has leprosy, the doors are to be closed off, and then only the priest can come in 7 days later to determine if it's spread or not. If it hasn't spread, we'll cut it out of the block, and you can save the building. If it has spread, you've got to set that building on fire, tear everything down, and start over again. In civilizations that were against God, when a city was overthrown, it either had to be burned by fire or it had to be buried. Like there was no neutrality here. The idea, the assumption was that these structures had spiritual significance. And so just using that as a frame of view or a frame of reference for us, I'm not sure. Like, I don't know. What I do know is I don't share their view of structures. I wish I did, but I don't belong to that culture. I belong to my culture, which has been super oppressed and abused through reductionistic reasoning. So I can't think the way they did. What I can say is, biblically, these things don't work the way we think they do. And so I don't really know how or why, but what I do know is it's biblical.
Also what crosses my mind that sometimes as evangelicals, where the Bible takes this, highest position at the top of the so-called pyramid, which it should be. I'm not, of course, against it. That's why we're evangelical, right?
Yep.
But sometimes I think that if we don't find something in this 1,000 pages book or collection of books, sometimes we can just shut the door, throw down everything that may sound unbiblical. But just because it's not mentioned in the Bible, it doesn't mean it's not real, or that we cannot. I don't want to say assume, but that we should not try to research and come up with the best possible conclusion we can when it comes to any topic. I mean, of course, we will never know in this time and age what was happening with this baby and with this babysitter, what was actually true, right? That's why we have all these hypotheses and right theories, and that's not wrong, right? But I'm just saying that even as an evangelical, sometimes we can be so wooden, so to speak, theologically. If this computer mouse is not in the Bible, no, I'm just going to reject it. That doesn't exist, or if it exists, it's demonic. Usually with fundamentalists, and I used to be like that a lot. If it's not in the Bible, shut down. Just I don't want to hear about it. So
Yep.
sometimes I think we're doing ourselves and others this service, because people can come with genuine experiences, people in the church or outside of church. And just because your ear is deaf to listen to their story, they may not want to come even to God thinking that all the Christians and all the churches are like you, just because you don't want to listen to them, because to you everything could be silly or childish, while this is their point of vulnerability. When they want to open, they want to share this story, even if it's ridiculous to you. So I think by us immediately closing the door to just anything, we are not doing ourselves service, intellectual service, and we're not helping others who may have, questions, or like, hey, I have this concern, I have this experience. Can you help me as a religious person? So I don't know. It's just a thought.
And I actually see this this podcast that we do here as being touch points for people who maybe have been hurt by fundamentalism, maybe have been rejected and abandoned, criticized, and said that they didn't experience what they experienced, and they walk away thinking Christianity cannot explain what I've experienced. Therefore, Christianity cannot be true or cannot contain the fullness of the truth. And so I don't see what we're doing simply as entertainment, although it's definitely is entertaining. I see what we're doing almost as like an evangelistic, like, hey, you know what? We can make sense of these things, and even further, we can show how God is using all these weird things to point back to Christ. And so, although there are certain people who have been hurt, and that's terrible, and I know that there are good and godly brothers and sisters in Christ who hold to those, hyper fundamentalistic views, they're going to have to stand before God someday, and they're going to have to give an account for, hey, you know what, I wanted to do your work, and I wanted to do it the way that I thought you intended, and maybe I hurt some people in the process. And so, yeah, I think maybe it's great for people like us who can be open-minded and can say, look, I'm not saying that this happened, but if it did, I can make sense of it. I'm not afraid of it. My God is bigger, right? And so, yeah, no, I completely agree with you that this hyper fundamentalistic way of looking at the scripture, where we have to interpret every single thing through a hyper literal lens, and if it doesn't occur in chapter and verse in the Elizabethan King James, right, then we just have to reject it altogether. It doesn't belong in our worldview. And I think that that's just demonstrably false when you look at 2,000 years of church history. These things were conversations going back and forth, and no one claimed to have the right answer, right? They just were processing these things and trying to understand these things. And so I think, I think that's what we're doing here, and that's why we can have fun doing what we're doing. We're not claiming that we have the answer. We're just thinking out loud.
Hey, Shaun, don't you know that Trinity is invented because the word is not in the Bible?
Oh, man.
Are you one of those Trinitarians?
I definitely am a Trinitarian.
I can tell by your beard. Looks suspicious. Okay, I'll continue reading. So the babysitter heard the voice, but then, so they heard a voice upstairs thinking it's a 3-year-old child, but then it heard her cousins and aunt playing outside. All the hairs on my body stood up, and I literally felt a chill run down my spine. And I can say, I don't blame you. There's nothing embarrassing about that. I quietly turned around, walked down the stairs. So the girl didn't even open the door to see, to inspect, to play a Sherlock Holmes. But again, she was just a teenager. So yeah, we cannot be hard on her. So I quietly turned around, walked down the stairs, got in my car, and drove away. The baby was still crying when I closed the door behind me. A few years later, I was drunk at a family party. Okay, she's honest, right? No judging. She was drunk at a family party and told my uncle the story. He told me that he and his wife used to hear the baby too. And apparently the previous owners had a kid die of SIDS in that room upstairs. He was uber Catholic. I love this word, uber Catholic. She just came up with this expression. So he was uber Catholic and had a mass said for the baby. He said after that it never happened again. Still gives me the willies when I talk about it though. Okay, so even though Shaun and I are not Catholics, but we don't condemn anyone, we disagree theologically and biblically with our brothers and sisters coming from different churches and faith traditions. But like this sentence, Shaun, stood up to me that her um, that the previous owner whose child died, and I think these are where the screams and cries are coming from, right? That he was uber Catholic and had a mass said for the baby, and after that, it never happened again. Okay, so I don't think this was the previous owner because his baby died. So this was probably she was talking about her uncle. But my question is here because so many Protestants are against Catholics when it comes to different doctrines, doctrines. If the mass said for the baby worked and this cry never happened again, my question is why would God honor mass for the baby if the mass was so wrong or sinful?
Yeah, well, I mean, so this gets kind of in the weeds of church history, but the mass, what divided Luther and Rome on the mass was whether or not it was a propitiatory sacrifice. So there was no question about whether or not it was the real presence of God with in Lutheran theology. In fact, in Lutheran churches, they still call it a mass. So the issue was whether or not the Eucharist that is presented and offered to God at that moment for the sake of the sins of the world, whether or not this is at the present time as it's being offered, atoning for the sins of the congregation. So Luther would say, no, this was a once for all sacrifice offered on Calvary, and this is a representation of that, self same body and blood of Christ. But this here is not a presentation of it to God for our forgiveness. That was done once. This is a presentation to you because be ye reconciled to God. I like that better than the Roman Catholic theology because I don't have to try to make that work with Hebrews that says that it was once for all sacrifice for sins. But as you can see there, it's not too far off the reservation. So it's not so far out there that we would call it heretical, right? So in a mass, what a lot of what it is it's because I grew up Roman Catholic. It's prayers offered to God, prayers for God's favor towards you for the whole world. That the merits that Christ offered would be applied to the sin debt of the world, and especially the congregation and all the faithful. And then the offering or the Eucharist that would then be offered. In some of these cases where you have a mass said for somebody, it is the idea is that the mass is offered and it is like the merits are posthumously applied to the deceased in such a way that if they had accepted Christ as Savior and if they died in a state of great relative grace, not committing any mortal sin, then perhaps that could have some sort of positive effect on how long they have to be in purgatory. So, of course, we reject purgatory. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's saying prayers. And so if we had a baby crying in our house that we had no idea where it was coming from, I think we would also pray. And I think that God would also honor that prayer and say, okay, so I don't think that this is like the mass was effective in and of itself. I think it was effective for the same reason us praying would be effective, that God saw the intentions of his people and he blessed them because they were seeking his face.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And because of prayer, not because of our perfect theology, but because God is faithful and wants to honor also his name when we call upon him, he could have just stopped at ghostly voice coming just to give them peace and not to be haunted and disturbed night after night. I'm not a parent, but I would not be able to imagine losing a baby and then coming back and haunt you every night. You hear the cry, you open the door, there's nothing, but you keep hearing. That will mess you up emotionally, mentally, psychologically, spiritually. I don't care how much godly you are. That will traumatize you for life. So in that context, I think you're right that it's not the mass per se. It could be just calling upon God, God showing mercy, not like honoring your flawed theology or my flawed theology, but just being loving and kind and faithful to his name, that he sees you calling upon his name and asking for mercy and for help. And as the good father, he comes, and whatever was causing, whatever spirit, let me use that word, was causing that turmoil, he just removes it.
Amen.
So yeah, I think that's a good
Well,
yeah, I
and
think
let
that's a good explanation.
praise God and thank him that we don't have to have perfect theology before he will bless us. Because if that was the case, we would definitely, none of us would be blessed.
Yeah, I keep hearing sometimes stories from my I will use this word Uber because the girl used the word Uber Catholic. I hear some stories from my Uber Pentecostal friends how they're yelling at demons and all these things, and it worked, or like shouting like in tongues, and then it worked as a spiritual warfare. But sometimes I'm thinking, but I want to tell them because I can hurt their feelings, which I don't want to. I'm thinking, do you think it was really because you were yelling and screaming and shouting in so-called angelic tongues that God allow the demons to go away or healing, or it was God that honored your faith, that he saw your faith and calling upon your name, and that he heard and fulfilled the cry of your heart? Could it be that it's the latter, not the former? Because sometimes I know this also by myself. If I think I'm leading a holier life for a season, and I pray and I things being happening and fulfilling, I may think of myself not in an arrogant way, but I may think, wow, I probably live in a really good life, very close to God, so that he honors me and fulfills all my wishes because I'm probably spiritually and theologically very sound. But that can actually mess you up because your focus instead of God is on yourself, to think, oh, I'm probably doing good in this season. That's why God is blessing me with all these things, material, spiritual, intellectual, whatever. But that can be a trap. I don't know if you would agree.
Oh, I would absolutely agree. I mean, Jesus said that it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven. And at the time that he said that, it was God was promising to provide wealth to those who were most obedient to him, right? So for that rich man, the context was not what it was for us. Somebody who proffered off of somebody else's poverty. That wasn't what it meant to be rich. What it meant to be rich was that God was blessing you, and yet he was saying it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. Nothing that you do, none of your works, nothing that you do earns you merit or favor before God. It's what God did. It's what Christ did. And so yeah, all he asks you to do is trust in that, and then walk that out in faith. And so yeah, no, nothing that we do is going to earn that favor. Nothing that we do is going to get that blessing. And a lot of times, I think that when you have uber Pentecostals that are sitting there with their olive oil and their stuff, and they're screaming at demons, I can just imagine the angel coming to kick the demon out, and the demon's like, really, like this? And the angel's like, come on, let's go. Like, no. Yeah, I know they're crazy. They're crazy.
Yeah, because sometimes I can hear from even from my own friends, like unknowingly twisting the word of God. For example, when 2 and 3 are gathering in my name, I'm there with them. Just read the whole chapter. It's about the church discipline. It's not about the spiritual war. God is already with you, even if you're with 2, 3, or 15,000 people. He's already with you. So you're completely right. Like, you can see people butchering different Bible verses, yet God is granting their wishes and prayers, not because he's a genie, but because he's faithful. I believe when we call upon his name and he sees faith, he doesn't have to see like, oh, like, wow, your theology is so amazing, your prayerful life is so amazing, wow, you give 20% of your paycheck, yeah, wow, I'm so impressed, that's why I'm gonna bless you like above and beyond. I just think, well, that can certainly happen, but I think on the other hand, God can bless even our ignorance, even our lack of knowledge, or surpass that lack of knowledge and ignorance, because he sees that we're pursuing him despite of our flaws.
Yeah.
And that's where he shows maybe even more how graceful and amazing he is. And we went totally into systematic theology from talking about ghosts, but I want people to see we're not just talking about giants and UFOs and ghosts, like, some, like, if we're just secular people who just want to have fun and maybe speak stories of sensationalism and attract traffic on the channel. We also want to have fun and talk about Jesus and ghosts and giants and UFOs. I don't know how that always goes together, but it has to work somehow. So it's fun.
Yes. Amen.
Shaun, it's your turn. When it comes to the next story, we have the story of a dead soldier.
I had just finished my initial military training, basic, AIT, a few other classes, and got sent to my first duty station. My unit was at NTC to pre-deployment training, so I met up with the rear echelon. I get issued my room and spent 3 very disturbed days and nights in the barracks with weird stuff happening, like gear not where I left it, locked drawers being opened, the microwave turning on by itself, stuff like that. My roommate, who I knew throughout training, showed up on the 4th day, and I told him something along the lines of, "Watch your stuff. Someone's been messing with my stuff, and I don't know who." So the 4th night comes around, and myself and my roommate secure our room and our gear and go to bed. Got to be up at 5:30 for PT, so it's an early night. We lock all of our stuff up and go to bed. I woke up around 0100 because my blanket had fallen to the ground and I was cold, which was weird because we were in the South in the summer, so it's always hot. I hopped down to get my blanket and I noticed my armoire is open, so I open the lock, close it, lock it, and get back to bed. I fell back asleep pretty easily, but I woke up again at about 0230, and all my stuff and my roommate's stuff is thrown around the room. I wake up my roommate, and he's ticked because someone is messing with us, and he can't figure out who it is. We clean it up, lock our stuff, and go back to bed. I woke up a third time at 0337, and
Yeah, I just want to add one detail. I love all these details when it comes to timing, because when I write incident reports at work, when I have issues and accidents and incidents, I try to be accurate with the timing, because it's more presentable if it's ever used on the court of law or by the police officers. And I like this guy. You can already see that he's such a professional army guy, because you could have put 3:35 or 3:40 a.m., but no, he put 3:37 because that's what he saw on his watch and that's what he put, and that's accurate. So that brings up, I don't know, the story itself already is much more interesting to me and much more credible, because it has that like specific timing that not many people would put. That's all I wanted to say.
yeah, well, and that's a lot of that's the details that come through their training. Most of the MOSs are extremely detailed. I mean, they're all extremely detail oriented, but there's a lot of stuff where it's like you have to keep exact measurements of time, exact measurements of distance traveled, and so some of the stuff is life and death. And so when it's exact, it's got to be exact. So that just spills over into your everyday life. And so I know a lot of guys who were in the military who still use the military alphanumeric system, who still use the 2400 clock, because it's that was their experience with adulthood, and so that is their culture. Even after being separated for decades, that's their culture. All right, I'm going to continue here. I could hear my roommate snoring, so I know it's not him. I sat up and saw someone in a little kitchenette area with the fridge open looking in it. I was freezing again. I was about to say something as the soldier turned around. My eyes had a moment to adjust to the bright light, and then I started recognizing gear, like the L-shaped flashlight on his shoulder, his Alice pack with magazine holders and canteens, boots and fatigue. This dude was combat ready. As my eyes reached his face, he turned a bit and I could see it. Half his head and helmet were gone, blown off by the looks of it. I'm beyond scared at this point. He closed the fridge, walked across the room, keeping his bright green eyes on, uh, opened my front door, and walked out. As he exited, he turned back around and said to me, "Be safe."
Okay, let's take a minute break, please. Okay, this is already so fascinating. This last paragraph that you just read, one of the things that captured my mind is that whenever uh, he noticed the presence of this entity, a cold air came. Now, usually, researchers and people who go through paranormal stuff and many stories and eyewitness accounts that both of us covered on the channel, but also outside in our personal lives, usually cold air is always followed by the presence of an evil entity. But in this case, it's also cold air, but it's not evil entity. This uh, ghostly figure of a dead soldier is there to warn them and not to harm them. Yet it's still cold. This is the first time I think since I've been reading, following, listening to this, paranormal, supernatural experiences that cold air is not necessarily associated with the evil presence. So I just want to ask you, because you've been following stories like this before I did, is that also your experience, or in some instances you do remember that cold presence and cold air would be also followed by benevolent entities as well?
I don't know that I've ever heard of a benevolent entity, maybe neutral, like where they just didn't show that they were outright malicious. But no, you're right. The cold, and so there's a few theories. One of them is that it is um, the energy, the heat energy of the air is being used for this spirit to manifest, and so it's pulling all of the energy from the air in the form of thermal energy, and so this certain area where it's pulling from is going to reduce and in temperature, and then at the same time that you'll get cold spots, cameras will go dead. So it's also going to be pulling chemical energy from batteries. And so at the same time as you're getting a thermal drop or a reduction of energy, you're getting a reduction of energy from these chemical energy sources like batteries. Um, and, and another thing is, this guy was opening the fridge. So it could be cold air just coming from the fridge. Like, so yeah, I don't necessarily know if I would associate that with necessarily being negative, but I do take this this "be safe" this comment as a little bit um, maybe not so genuine, right? Like if you're going to have an entity like almost maybe somewhat of a warning, and one of the reasons that I say that is he's missing half his face, right? Now this is pre-deployment, right? So these guys are training groups to go and deploy, which means that they're here, right? So they're not in theater, they're here. So why would he have half of his face blown off? Well, suicide, right? Uh, he wasn't taking rounds, or if he was, then his he FedExed his spirit back to the United States, right? Um, so yeah, I think that maybe that's a little bit ominous.
Yeah, that's a good point. But also imagine, how would you feel that all of your friends are sleeping? It's like 3:30, 3:40 in the morning. Not only that you feel this eerie cold presence, and not only that you see a ghostly appearance, but this ghost is lacking half a head and helmet. I mean, I'm not saying it's the scariest experience someone can have in their life. We've read so many scary stories on the podcast in the last several months, but I mean, I'm thankful that the soldier, not just that he survived, but that he turned this to be, uh, well, I don't want to spoil, but he turned this to be into something good instead of like, I don't want to trust this, get away from me. Well, we don't even know was the soldier a believer or not. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that definitely is one of the most interesting stories we read lately because I feel that most of the stories we cover they're like X-File episodes or Twilight Zone. Like there's no real ending. There's no like, oh, and they live happily after. It's like sometimes there's, or many times there's simply no ending. You don't know what will happen later, or the ending is how you interpret it, or like, it's not satisfying. The ending. You keep asking, like, was there more? What happened years after the report? All those, things that when I was a kid watching X Files or like I said, Twilight Zone when I was super young, like most of these endings are like not satisfying because you don't know who is winning, was it good or evil, always that dilemma, or like you think you defeated the evil, but then there's this nefarious resurrection, or there's like a new ghost or a new entity showing up, or people thought they defeated and now the human person is becoming demonized, and all these kind of endings that we're not satisfied with. So at least I'm glad that for this soldier he didn't turn this into something negative and scary, because I'll be freaking out to see a ghost that is missing half a head. So I'm just saying that at least to this point I'm glad that this young soldier is turning this into something like, hey, maybe something positive can come out of this. Yeah, that's all.
Something interesting that may interest you or our listeners is, and of course I know my parents are listening, so they know this to be true. This story, although pretty freaky, right? I can guarantee you that is not the scariest story any soldier who comes out of those training camps has. Um, I have some scary stories about the aircraft hangar. So yeah, I mean, we yeah, that stuff like that, it's just normal. When you get a bunch of young guys together and they're sleep deprived and they're working and they're away from their families, um, bad stuff happens and it leaves an impression, right? And so, I don't know if it's just that these places are haunted, or if it's that these places just have an excess of extremely negative energy. But most of military bases, that they will have residual hauntings that many people there experience. If not once, some of them maybe regularly.
So is it because I'm trying to understand why? Is it because locations like army posts and um, fortresses or whatever, where they had hundreds and thousands of soldiers, and where all kind of sin is happening, where all kind of bizarre things are happening, including that? Is it because there's trauma is being multiplying, sin is being multiplying, death is being multiplying, that those things draw evil spirits and freaking excellence more? Can we then make a parallel the same thing with a hospital or with a jail, with any place where there's a lot of people? Because according to the Bible, and also we know this in real life, right? As we multiply, I'm paraphrasing, as we multiply, the sin is also multiplying, but also is the grace of God. So could it be that one of these locations, including army base, has an increased number of this supernatural freaky, accidents more than your regular neighborhood in any American town, because of there's so many people closing a space. They perform different things that are not godly, and that can be drawing certain powers or entities, and then something that we call haunted, the area that wouldn't be otherwise haunted becomes haunted, because there's so many people doing so many wrong things, wicked things, and they draw something negative. Maybe not, I'm just thinking out loud.
I think that's definitely part of it. Another big part of it is you have to imagine what is going on in these training environments is it is controlled psychological torture, right? So you're taking these young men, some of which have never been away from home, and you're turning them into killers. And the way that you have to do that is you have to break them down. And so this is and it's done in the safest possible way. I don't want to try to say, like, that there's anything nefarious going on, but there's something that they have to do. And in order to take a sniveling 17-year-old boy and make him a killer, you have to put him through the paces. And I've seen kids cry for their mom. I've seen kids, just completely break down and just rip their gear off, just throw everything. They were just done. They snapped. And when you have a place like that, um, the amount of psychological energy that is just super, super negative, not because the cadre wanted to do anything negative. They wanted to protect these kids, right? They don't want to send anybody over there who's not going to be able to endure, right? And if you're going to go to a war zone and you can't hack it, we want to know now, not when you get over there and you got bullets flying over your head, right? So yeah, it's just the people that experience that, the negative energy is just, it's ridiculous. And so it is it's always transient. It's never home, right? You never feel at home there. And it's just a place where people have been, for lack of a better word, tortured in order to turn them into the strong men that they are. I mean, you're taking 20 years of maturity and trying to compress it down into 12 weeks. It's tough. It's tough, and it leaves scars. And so I totally think that that's part of it. And dude, if you look at the guys who have been in consistently, active duty guys, 15, 20 years, they're not right. They'll tell you they're not right. Right? This is what is it, like captive development or something, like, or arrested development? That's what it is. These guys, God bless them, but um, they can't just be released into general population and be expected to play well, right? So if that's what's going on there, in order for us to have the safest, most powerful military in the world, if that's the sacrifice that we have to give up, our children, send them into the grinder there, for lack of a better word. And I'm 100% pro-military, but just, we kind of have to have our eyes open as to what it is, right? Um, and so, yeah, there's no doubt that there would be negativity there. There's no doubt that there would be, that there's pain. Then and if this is a place of pain and negativity and trauma, if it doesn't produce negative entities, it will definitely attract them. Yeah. Okay. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I didn't wake my roommate up. I just sat up in bed for about 2 hours till I had to get ready for PT. 0630 rolls around, so everyone is outside the barracks in formation, getting ready to start PT. And the acting first sergeant says, "Hey, not Chase. You good? Looks like you seen a ghost." I replied with, "Negative, I'm fine. First sergeant, good to go." About halfway through PT, he comes up to me and asks me what's wrong because I'm visibly shaken up. I told him I was fine, just couldn't sleep last night. A few others asked if I was okay, and I just lied and said I was fine. I really wasn't, and they could see that, but they let me be. After PT, after PT ending, the acting first sergeant pulled me to the side and told me, "Speak freely and openly, and with all confidential and with all confidentially and off record, what's wrong?" I told him that if I told him what happened, he would think I was bat crap crazy. He assured me it was off record and once again said, "Talk to me. You seriously look like you've seen a ghost." That got an awkward chuckle out of me, and I began to tell him my story. And when I got to the part about his head, the acting first sergeant lost his crap. "Who the heck put you up to this? This is not funny," etc., etc. He smoked me, which means he made me work out, for about 30 minutes, made me do push-ups, mountain climbers, stuff like that, all the while yelling at me that I'm a piece of crap. Finally, after about 30 minutes of that, he says, Look at me in the eye and swear on everything that you love that you're not lying to me. I told him I was not lying. It did happen. So he says, follow me. So I do. We get to the command office, which I had never been in, and they were obviously locked. He takes me behind 3 locked doors and 3 rooms I had never stepped foot in, and when he opened the last door, I saw it. It gave me chills. It still gives me chills. But plain as day, there's the soldier's portrait behind the commander's desk. I froze and said, that's him. Acting first sergeant, the guy who assigned me that room, told me who it was. He was a corporal in the unit on my unit's first deployment to Iraq, and he died in an IED attack that took off part of his head. I was the first soldier to be assigned that room since it belonged to the deceased corporal.
I just want to say something. So the theory that he committed suicide right here on the soil of the America wasn't true. So he was killed in Iraq in war. So he died as a hero, if we can put it that way. But somehow God allowed him to transition, not just in different dimension, but also in different location. So to warn this young kid, hey, be aware, things are coming. This is so weird, yet it's beneficial. How that works, I have no clue. I think only God can reconcile this. To me, it's causing me a headache. It doesn't make sense, but it works. How? I don't know.
Yeah, he FedExed his ghost back to the United States. Okay.
The following day, delivery.
That's right. That's right.
More expensive shipping, but it works.
He forgave me and I forgave him, and he told me some stories about who this guy was. I deployed with that unit just a couple months later and spent 12 months fighting in that crap hole. I nearly died. I don't know how many times. My vehicle got hit with IEDs and rockets, and it always made me think of that corporal. I survived more things than most people can imagine, and I always felt like that corporal was keeping an eye out for me. Not everyone in my unit was as lucky as me. 3 from my unit didn't get to come home.
It's quite a story. We didn't have a military story like this on the channel yet. So I think this is a very unique story that, again, turned out to be good. I didn't want to spoil it. I mean, again, I don't have final conclusion, but if we know that God is sovereign and he allowed this to happen so the kid would be warned, and even though this is also like in the Bible, like God would pick one widow to feed and others may be dying. I don't have all the explanations. So in this war, some kids died, but this kid was spared. How? Why? And God is sovereign. Yeah, there's a ghost that warned him. Again, I have no clue how all of those ingredients of the story make sense. To me, it doesn't make sense, yet it works in reality. So that's all I know. I think we have to be humble with how much we don't know.
And one thing that I want to know is, if this ghost had good intentions, then why are they wrecking their room? Because they're going to lose their weekend pass if their room is wrecked, right? Like that's just
I'm thinking maybe to like
sounds like a blue falcon.
Tell to the kid, hey, pay attention, I'm here, like, because the ghost cannot write on the wall or something, right? I'm thinking about the book of Daniel, so probably maybe this ghost wasn't that advanced. Okay, so we don't know. But even though it was wrecking his room, it wasn't like to ruin him. It was so small compared to like warning him to like, hey, pay attention to my warning. Just take care of yourself. Big scary things are coming, and those big scary things were not demonic. That was actually war. So even though a spiritual entity was used to warn the boy, it wasn't warning him about some gods and demons and chupacabra, whatever. I mean, there's some silly things. It was about actually, hey, you're going to war, your friends will die, but you be safe. And the kid came back safe. How much sound he came back, I don't know, but he came back safe and alive. Nothing was missing, even though he said there are numerous instances where I could have died and I didn't. So even he doesn't know where his life was spared. So I hope, like in biblical instances, he will use this as a testimony to, travel, preach, tell people how God has been merciful to him, so that people will have an extra dose of hope when they hear of God that preserves lives when it's impossible and without us deserving that. Which again is a parallel to us saying 20, 30 minutes ago about us praying or believing theologically not sound things, yet God still being faithful to his name and us calling upon his name and fulfilling our prayers and requests and cries of our hearts, not because of us, but because of him. So in this story, I think it can be turned around that if he comes to Christ, he can just speak of these things by pointing to God and just, giving and instilling new dose of hope to people. I just think, especially in these days, we all need hope.
Amen.
Okay, dokie. So it's my turn. Okay, so this is the next story. This was at a house we lived in for about 7 years. Many strange things happened in that house. For example, you could hear voices murmuring from time to time. And then I saw a shadow person. I saw someone stick their head into the room once. None of it felt hostile, but the same couldn't be said for this pervasive feeling my mother and I both felt if we went out front at night. She and I both felt like there was something watching and it wasn't friendly. Maybe it was your perv neighbor. I mean, not it was necessarily a demon. You don't know. Sometimes you don't know your neighbors, and then you hear about them in the news when it's too late. Okay. On this particular night, it was about midnight or so, and I felt like driving to the 24/7 grocery store since I wanted some snacks. As I stepped out the front door, I saw something out of the corner of my eye and turned to look. There was this very tall thing just floating, for lack of a better term. I would almost describe it as hanging, but there was nothing holding it up. And it was outside my brother's window. It was seemingly covered in a sheet that had once been white. This is such a stereotype. Like, why are all the ghosts covered in white? Like why? Okay. But let's say this happened, hypothetically, okay? But was extremely dirty. So it was more off-white and got brown with mud and dirt, and further down it went. So this was a ghost that wasn't doing his laundry. I think we're safe to conclude that. Like, it was a lazy ghost. There were no visible feet, nor eyes or face, but I could tell it was staring at my brother's window. As I stared at it, it turned to look at me, and I remember feeling like one of those butterfly specimens pinned to a board. That's such a good description. So the person saying this, sharing this testimony, was scared, like, and I don't blame him. I like this expression. I remember feeling like one of those butterfly specimens pinned to a board.
Yeah.
It was as though its stare was physically holding me in place. Okay, this reminds me of stories, Shaun, and we had stories like this when an entity is staring at a person, and an entity is so big and so formidable, so scary, so huge, so muscular, so scary, so out of this world that it would literally paralyze the person, the human person, that they cannot walk, they would even pee themselves, they would lose their ability to talk. So they're not having sleep paralysis, they're not sleeping, they're awake. But this will happen because they're in such a state of shock that they are not able to do anything. Basically, if their life would depend on them in that second, they would die because they cannot defend themselves, they cannot run, they're just buried in that position. So this reminds me of that. Like, this person was so shocked that he couldn't do anything.
Yeah, well, and there's flesh and blood creatures that can do that too. It's called infrasound, and they can emit this really low frequency sound wave that interacts with anybody around them, and it basically just like shuts down your nervous system.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, God made some very amazing animals. So just stay away from them. Learn your enemy, but stay away from them. So it felt like an entity, but only for a second or two passed. And it looked back at the window, the pressure lifting, and then it vanished. Right as it vanished, there was a fluttering of wings in the tree above, and one of our neighborhood's owls came to perch there. Now, usually owls, and I think this is part of superstition, but usually owls, like with Mothman and some other legends, maybe even with Native Americans, I'm not sure, they can be associated with something evil, like demonic. But I think we demonize owls so much. I mean, after all, God made them, so they could be associated with something. But owl is just an owl. I don't think it's evil or something like that. I think that would be ridiculous to state something like this. However, in this story, not only that the owl is not evil, or there's nothing evil attached to an owl, but an owl and the animal that represents the owl is kind of redeemed, because he says one of the neighborhood's owl came to perch there, and in a way it felt like the owl came to my defense, as silly as that may sound. So I don't know what to think about it, but I'm glad that this is one of those rare stories that, especially when you compared to the story in rural places like West Virginia, because I had a couple of guests, including one pastor from West Virginia, when we talk about the Mothman sightings in his areas. Like, usually owls are always associated with Mothman and with all these demonic appearances, but in this story, an owl wasn't scary, and actually he felt safer when it came into his presence. For the life of me, I don't know what to think about it, but you've been, again, following these things longer than me. I don't know if you have anything to comment on that.
Yeah, there's a few things that I'm noticing. Like you said, okay, so owls are typically associated with negative things. We know that the screech owl, right, the terror of the night, is actually really refers to a type of demon. The terror of the night,
The
or
Lilith.
the Lilith demon. Yeah. In Native American lore, the screech owl is associated with death. And the only way that you will hear an owl is by its screech. You don't hear the fluttering of wings. Owls fly silently. So the fluttering of wings in a tree, that gives away that it's not an owl, um, because owls fly silently. In fact, they fly so silently that there was this. Oh, I don't know
I
if you.
saw the video, the experiment. I saw
Yeah,
when they're comparing all the birds and they put the owl. But Shaun, could it be because there are dozens of different types of owls? Could it be that some of them are loud or not when they're flapping wings? Do you think this is general for all the owls?
I mean, it could be. I don't. I'm. I don't know enough about owls. But I do know that they're said to fly silently. One of the reasons that they're so feared is because they fly silently and they hunt in the night. And the only reason, or the only way that you would even know they're there, is when they let out their screeching call, right? And so they're always associated with death. Also, there's a he's a researcher. His last name is McClelland, and he's known as the Owl Guy. And he says that many what they call screen memories, like if somebody has an encounter with what they would consider to be like an alien, which we know are demons, but if there's missing time, they'll just remember seeing an owl. They don't remember anything about the event where all of the missing time went. They don't remember anything about the beings, and sometimes that will get addressed through what is it, regressive hypnotherapy, where then they start unwinding, like, what was it that happened. But all that they'll have their screen memories of an owl, and some of these owls are like 6 foot tall. Like, so it's so, like, blatantly obvious it cannot be an owl, but they'll just remember it as an owl. So owls, like, not only are culturally associated with negativity, but even subconsciously, like, we just receive that screen memory as an owl.
But they're also personified in so many cultures, portraying wisdom, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. It's like, well, I mean, depending what type of wisdom are you receiving? Is it like was it Okay, I'm not sure, but was it Masons or Illuminati who have owl as a sign of wisdom? So in that context, let's say it's true. I forgot, and I don't want to Google while we're going live. But let's say one of those secret societies have owl as a sign. In that context, then I would not take it as good because these societies, despite of what they're saying publicly, what good they're doing to to help you know communities and countries, whatever, I don't think they're godly societies at all. So in that context, because of that, I wouldn't take their owl sign to mean the wisdom of God that is portrayed in the Bible. Okay, the second thing I wanted to say, if this was not any type of owl known to you or to me, because owls, most of them are silent, then I'm thinking if the guy saw a bird or a flying animal or a flying entity coming to his rescue, and then this entity left, and if it wasn't an owl, yet he saw an owl, he was either mistaken and saw some other animal, so some other species of birds, or could it be, I'm going now super wild X-File, you know, scenario, could it be that it was something, I don't want to say angelic, but could it be that it was something really good and protective and benevolent that just it camouflages itself as an owl because it could be, oh, everyone knows an owl, everyone knows a pigeon, everyone knows this so and so. So then you wouldn't be so scared. You'll be like, oh, like no big deal, because it when you see something familiar to you, in general, our nature does not hold this defensive wall between us and something that is known. Usually we have this defensive wall when it comes to something unknown. So I'm thinking, if let's say it was God's intervention, some divine intervention to protect him, could it be, of course, we're just going hypothetical because we don't know. I'm thinking, then could it be something that was good? I don't want to say an angel, but then just camouflaging or portraying itself as an owl for a minute or two, just so this guy would see, calm down and relax, and then fly away, and then maybe showing its real appearance. We don't know. I'm just thinking as you're speaking. I'm just visualizing, and these things are coming to my mind.
I think quite certain, or I mean, definitely it could be. It could be, and yeah, I mean, owls have been, like, especially with the Greeks. Athena's symbol was the owl, right? And she was the goddess of wisdom. Um, she also was a very, very fickle goddess. But yeah, no, I totally could be. It could also be that something really terrible happened with this creature that it saw, or that he saw. Um, and he doesn't remember any of it. He just remembers the creature disappearing, and instead there's an owl, and doesn't remember anything else. I would be interested to know if there was any lost time here.
Sorry, while you were talking, I was googling. I couldn't. I was so curious. I had to go and Google and see about Illuminati and Freemasons and the owl, and then I was reading when you were talking, and that's why I took a pause.
Oh, you're good.
I only have, yeah, I only have two sentences, and then we have two more stories, and that's basically it for tonight. So again, he was talking about the owl, and he said our neighbors loved a pair of owls, and they were more like neighbors to us. So maybe it was just a protective of a fellow neighbor. That's how I like to think of it, anyway. Okay, so he's basically concluding the story not in the same way that we were talking about, because you expanded on it so much more. But he also saw it like, hey, could it be that these neighbors' owls are, being my protectors in a way? Like cherubim in the Bible were the protectors of the sacred space. So maybe owl is protective of a protector of my neighborhood in a way. I mean, I'm not saying it is, probably not. Who knows? But it's in a way, the story ended in a cool way. Like one flying entity came and just made the other flying entity disappear. How that works, what is behind the scene, I have no clue. But yeah, we have two more stories, so the next one is yours whenever you're ready. Unless you want to add something on this story as well, that's fine.
I was just thinking it's kind of like in that movie, The Mummy, Imhotep being afraid of cats. All right.
Everyone is afraid of cats. Don't be ashamed to say that.
About 5 years and two boyfriends ago, this lady moved into an old farmhouse with
Hey,
her.
hey girl, lady, thank you for telling us about your past relationships, right?
Right, right. Well, I didn't want to say I because, yeah, I didn't want to cause any confusion. I don't have boyfriends. Um, I mean, I know the beard, but gentlemen, calm down. All right. Moved into an old farmhouse with
I'm
my
gonna have to block his inbox after the episode.
with my then significant other. He was a hoarder and was embarrassed about the state his house was in after his wife left him. He had an RV and that's where he slept because there was just garbage, clothes, boxes up to your knees in every room of the house. Me, being extremely distressed by clutter, cleaned that house. Down to cobwebby corners of the ceiling, it took me weeks, but I used Murphy's oil on every inch of wood, filled his truck with over 10 loads of garbage. The very first night I was there, things were weird.
Yeah, I just want to say something before you continue. Do you see how much she paid attention? You can see like this is like a really woman that keeps paying attention to details. She's like, the garbage was up to my knees. I used Murphy's oil. Like, if you're a guy, would you use all those details to tell, hey, I just cleaned the room, it was a mess? She's like, this. And I'm like, I hope no one knows who's your boyfriend because he would be embarrassed knowing that you're publicly spreading these stories about, how his house used to look like. Okay.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. This is not really nice of her to explain all this. But all right, the very first night I was there, things were weird. At that point, I had only cleared part of the living room. The boyfriend snored unbearably loud, so I opted to sleep inside on the couch while he slept out in his camper.
Man, she said nothing good about her boyfriend.
Right?
Everything bad. Like he's snoring like an animal. No one can sleep around 10 miles around him. Like
He
she
can't
already said
sleep.
that he's a pig and that he snores like another sort of a pig. Like, is there anything good about your boyfriend?
He can't clean right. He can't sleep right. I don't know what he can do right. This man can't even.
Yet I'm with him because I feel so bad. So I'm taking care of him.
All right. Okay, I had just had a fight with my mother and was laying awake around 4 a.m., fuming about it. I heard my boyfriend come in the back door, muttering to himself as usual. He was opening and closing drawers and cabinets in the kitchen, figured he was searching for something. Finally, I got up because, hell, I was already awake. Maybe I could help him find whatever it was. The kitchen was 5 feet from where I was, and when I walked in, there was no one there. I looked around and called for him, but he wasn't there. I don't get scared easily, and at this point, I was just curious about where he was. I went out to the camper and could hear him snoring hard before I even got to the door. I shook him awake and asked him gently what he had needed in the house. He said he hadn't left the camper all night. I thought he was sleepwalking. When I went back inside, though, I noticed it had snowed lightly in the night, and the only tracks leading up to the camper were mine. A couple days later, I moved my two cats in. They are super on edge, a lot of growling, acting out of character, especially in the middle of the night. I completely dismissed that as it was a new, unfamiliar place. Obviously, they were uncomfortable. I had finally gotten the bedroom habitable, and they would not cross the threshold into it. The first night we slept in the bedroom, or the first night we slept in the bedroom, was when I started to fear the house. The bed was up against a window that faced out to the cornfield, and my guy insisted on sleeping on the outside of the bed, leaving me pressed against the window. I
Hey,
got the
Shaun,
story.
just a second. Sorry. Did she just unintentionally call her cats to be vampires? Because vampires, according to the Lord, cannot uh, go against the threshold unless you invite them in the house. And now she has cats; they cannot even step on the same. Yeah, are you sure your cats are cats? Like in the same, like with the previous story, are you sure those owls are just owls? I don't know.
So I wonder if the cats were male because she has nothing nice to say about any males. Maybe, dude, these cats can't even walk through a door.
Those male cats are the worst. They're snoring. They're not catching mice. They're not doing anything.
All right, let's see here. I got this horrible feeling. Something was right outside the window, and I was frantic to the point of tears. I kept telling him there was something out there, and he said I was being dramatic, which was stupid because I'm just not. You spend your whole life being logical and calm, and when something weird happens, nobody believes you.
See
Yeah,
how defensive she is? I'm laughing. I'm enjoying this story so much. He's like, he told me I'm dramatic, and I'm not. I'm the only logical here.
yeah. He can't even clean his house. What's he talking about?
And I used Murphy. I have to
I
mention
use
that I used
Murphy's oil.
Murphy's oil. I didn't use one of your cheap things. I mean, Murphy's oil is pretty cheap, but still.
You gonna tell me there's not some outside? Boy, you can't even breathe right. Oh, all right. I slept on the couch. The next day, I noticed a handprint on the top of the bedroom window that I had just cleaned the day prior. I held my hand up to it, and it was thrice the size of my own hand, bigger than any person's handprint I've ever known. It wasn't just a print, though. It was elongated, as if the hand was dragged down the window. Still, could be an explanation, even though I had cleaned the window the day before and could have no could I'm sorry, and would have noticed, except the print was over 9 feet off the ground, directly over an open coal cellar. I showed my boyfriend, and he told me something surprising. His ex-wife thought there was something wrong with the house too. She was making dinner one day, and he had gotten home from work. Her back was turned to him, and they had a full conversation. Then she looked out the kitchen window and saw him pull up in his truck. He still blew it off with, okay, hold on. Pause. What? Like,
No,
yeah,
to this point, we were defending her boyfriend, but now we want to criticize him. Like first, you're telling your girl that she's over dramatic and that she's just hallucinating, and then you're hiding the story that you and your wife went through a similar thing, that the house is supposedly haunted, and you're keeping that as no biggie and it's a secret. And then when you're today nowadays to this present girlfriend is freaking out, even though she's the logical one, right?
right. Murphy's Oil.
You still don't want to believe her. I mean, come on. Okay, let's say you don't believe exactly what she told you, but not because of her, but because you may say, okay, I'm not superstitious. Fine. But you should still allow her to talk and express her frustration because it's early in the morning. She's going through a sort of a trauma. She can't sleep. She's over anxious, and you're just like trying to tell her brush it off and go to bed. Oh, and by the way, that happened to my wife, but both of you are crazy and I'm the only sane. I mean, that's also not fair. So she's the one that keep putting him down, and I was like, poor guy. And then now he comes, I'm like, he's actually not that great of a guy either.
Maybe he can't breathe right.
Maybe he needs Murphy's oil after all.
uh, he still blew it off with me, just telling me I was paranoid and such. All this time, I assumed he was right, dismissed my instincts, and went about things normally. Dude, that's a lie. That's a lie. There's no way that this woman would have been like, oh, yeah, no, you're right. I am just being crazy.
Yeah,
No.
I saw fingerprints of a hand 3 times bigger than mine. But yeah, my boyfriend had really good arguments that I didn't see it, even though it's there. But I was just gonna pretend it's not there and just try to go to bed. Dude, I wouldn't be able. I wouldn't be able to fall asleep. Like
No.
seriously, no.
Then, one morning in the spring, I got up to use the bathroom. It was 4:46 in the morning, and I knew the time because I checked my phone when I got up. The whole bedroom was light from the outside, and I quietly climbed back into bed. The house is all wood paneling, and because of my arachnophobia, I had the bed scooted about 5 inches away from the wall where our heads were. I laid down and tucked my arm up under the pillow with my hand over the edge. The second I closed my eyes, an icy cold hand grabbed me by the wrist and yanked down hard. I bolted up and, in a state of complete terror, shook my boyfriend awake and asked if he was messing with me. He wasn't. I will never forget that grip because I had to struggle to get my hand back. I called my close friend and she said, "You know what? There's a cemetery within view of your bedroom, right?" I had forgotten, but being a practical person, it had never occurred to me that there might be a connection. She said, "Let's try something. Come over with a sagebrush." And we smudged, or yeah, she came over with a sagebrush and we smudged the house. We were both laughing at ourselves as we did it. But the thing is, nothing weird happened after that. Well, except me falling into a hole in the floor. But I blamed that on my own clumsiness. A hole in the floor. But Murphy oil. It's supposed to fix the holes in the floor. Maybe you didn't see it.
Murphy's oil is like new essential oils. It like does miracle. Whatever you need to do,
Yeah.
put it on the wall against like the enemies, against the vampires and ghosts and demons. You need to get a job. Use Murphy's oil. You need a boyfriend. Use the Murphy's oil. For anything, just use Murphy's oil. It works better than those fundamentalist Christian women and their essential oil, because for them, essential. You have this disease or problem. There is an essential oil for that. I feel like they use that slogan like, "Oh, you need this." There's an app for that, so they're like now using, "Well, there's an essential oil for that."
Yeah. Let's see here. The relationship withered. I moved out, but we remain friends. He has nothing, or he says nothing strange has happened since I left. But he didn't think anything strange was going on. He just thought his ex-wife was crazy. So how would he know?
I think the guy had the zero ability to perceive and discern things, even if he was not a Christian. So let's say he was not indwelled by the Holy Spirit, so he couldn't discern what Christians can. But I mean, going through similar things with two different people telling you, and you're still not listening. I mean, I'm almost thinking there's no hope for you. Like, unless you actually see a werewolf in person, like, what would make you pay attention to this supernatural warfare? And like, God will have to come and shake you up and say, "Hey, man up, wake up." I don't know. Okay, I guess the last story is mine. Part one. You can already tell this person is like writing diaries, likes every detail. So it will be a long night, Shaun. Okay, because this is just part one. I feel like the author, I don't know if it's a female or male, was writing a book and they were like, page 87, I can't. Let me finalize and just make it into a story. I don't want to write a book. Okay. So part one, back in the 80s. Oh my gosh, we have 50 years of history to read. Okay, back in the 80s, my parents had just gotten married, graduated from college, and had my big brother. They moved into a small house in a very affluent neighborhood north of Milwaukee. The house was surprisingly in their budget. Again, just graduated from college and med school with a little one, but was the smallest on the block. My parents made an offer that was a few under the asking price. Two other couples offered more than the asking. It was a bidding war. However, the old man that owned the house rejected both of those offers and said he wanted my folks to have it. He said he and his late wife would both have agreed that it was the right thing to do. That's actually nice. Makes my heart warm. Unless the guy was a creep and a necromancer or a warlock and planned to do some occultic things with the family. So I don't want to go there. But so far, it sounds okay. My folks are super grateful and are extremely excited to be living in the neighborhood. There are many youngsters, so my brother had a lot of playtime. Life was very good. Then crap starts going down. Okay, so I guess the old guy's house wasn't that good after all. Part two. Part two. Even she gave it a headline: red light. The first thing was with the basement. Why is it always the basement? Why do monsters always live in the basement? Why is it about the lower level that they like to hide and scare people? Like, come on.
Because it's most like a cave.
Yeah, or maybe like the different levels of Sheol and all these compartments of the dead. So they like hiding in the netherworld, in the other world. I don't know.
Yeah.
So during this time, my mom stayed at home with my brother, and my dad was getting his practice started. He worked super late and was only home on Sundays, basically. That's already a red flag for marriage. I'm not married, but this already sounds very bad. My mom did laundry in the basement, and one day when she was walking upstairs, a red light at the bottom of the stairs turned on. Now, I'm told this is a super bright light, and the switch for it was taken out long ago. It is almost like a fallout shelter emergency light with a cage on it. My mom didn't know what to think, so she starts going downstairs to investigate. The light turns off. She figures that maybe it was some sort of surge. The next day, she goes downstairs again, comes up, and the light is on again. Again, starts walking down, and it turns off. I'm imagining these are like two ghostly entities. One is at the one end of the basement, one at the other, and they're just giving each other a sign. One is playing with this switch, one with one, and just having fun with this poor lady. That's how I'm imagining. But it's
Mm.
probably way worse. I'm just being optimistic, right? She does not shrug it off this time. She waits a bit at the bottom of the stairs and then walks back upstairs. The light turns on and she runs down this time to catch it. Only this time it starts, and she's capitalizing all the letters like she's yelling. It starts flashing like a strobe light before she can even reach the bottom. Sean, this reminds me almost of some alien or even human advanced technology that is, you know how you have those lights that they turn based on the movement of your body. So let's say here the light won't turn on, but if I just do this 1 yard away, then the signal, because it covers that area, will turn on. So
Mm.
this, if this was in the 80s, right? They didn't have that back then. At least I don't think so. Maybe I'm wrong. So if this would be happening today, maybe I can explain it rationally. But this sounds very freaky. Like the light will not randomly, but it would intentionally turn off and on based on her movement, and they don't have that technology we have it today. So would you agree that this was already something weird happening?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, thank you for your lengthy comment. Uh,
Well, no,
she,
I,
no,
I, I, I,
yeah,
I elaborate. I was just trying to think of, what, because I'm to guess I'm at this point thinking through it like her, like what would be causing this light to turn on and off, and then the fact that it was strobing. I mean, the only thing that I would think of if I was trying to think of a non supernatural thing would be like there was some sort of short, and the wire that runs for it might run against the staircase, and so when she puts weight on just a certain stair, then it grounds, and then it's turning on. And maybe the strobing was the wiring as it's getting worn out. Her walking down the stairs, and then every step it starts strobing. But that would be the only thing that I could think of. So the best case scenario, if it's not a demon, is your house is going to burn down. Um,
yeah. I'm trying to still stay positive in the story. I think the demons may be just having a party night, not trying to, you know, hurt her or her kids, just having fun.
just a rave. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, rave, beers, football on TV. That's it. I don't know. It's nothing plausible, right? Okay, so this is part three where it's get even freakier because I read this story a few nights ago, and she titled this part of the story "Knock Knock." After the red light thing, my mom is naturally shook up, and the husband is nowhere to be found. This is like Adam and Eve in garden. Where are you, Adam? It
Mm,
bothers me. Where is he? He's home like just on Sundays.
mm.
Ah, so she's scared to go downstairs without my dad. But there was something that started before the red light and escalated after knocking. My parents figured this was originally just natural sounds of the house, as it was fairly old. It would be very sporadic and very infrequent until one night my parents were in bed chatting about the day, bills, things of that sort. Then they started hearing knocking. I should add some sound effects to our stories.
There you go.
It started in their room under the bed. Then on the walls and ceiling, it would be about 30 seconds apart, and they could not find a source. Then it sounded like the knocking was outside their room. Man, whatever was after them was getting closer and closer.
Damn.
So they got up and tried following the sound and find where it was. They went all over the house trying to figure out where it came from. Every time they thought they found the source, it would jump to a different side of the room. I think because this was the 80s, I think they should have called the Ghostbusters. That's my solution. Because listen, there are knocks all over the house. They cannot find one source. Whenever they move to the source, there's another source. This sounds like, those ghosts from Ghostbuster movies are just having fun with this house. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
They eventually were in the foyer or living room and checked the knocking super frequently and super loud to the foyer closet. My mom had a fireplace poker in hand, and my dad a bat. He crept towards the closet, and as he reached for the doorknobs, a voice calls out to them, "Knock, knock." So a voice actually says, "Knock, knock." He swung the doors open, but there was nothing there, and all the knocking stopped. My parents could do nothing but stare at each other. Neither of them slept that night. I don't blame you. Part
Yeah.
4. Do you want to say something before I go?
Well, just like just the knocking. I mean, you could write it off as, if it's an old house and it's like lath and plaster walls, and you could have some, loose wood slats in the wall, and maybe mice crawling and could cause some sort of knocking. But the audible, like verbalizing of knock, knock, yeah.
Yeah, how many mice have you met that speak English? Maybe this is like a Splinter version from Mutant Ninja Turtles. I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe Mickey's on vacation. Where was he in the 80s?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, Mickey was on vacation. Okay, part 4 of the story. This is the best story we had all night, I think. And she titled it, "It Pushed Me." This person is so much gifted in writing and giving creepy titles. If this person will ever see this episode, please start writing books and stories, please. Okay. After the red light and knock knock, my parents are wary of this house. My mom is on the verge of a breakdown, and I honestly feel bad for this lady, what she went through. And she was not dealing well with this at all. Remember, she's in this house all day with this nonsense. My dad is usually more skeptical towards this kind of stuff. And I have to say, men are usually more skeptical. That's true. But he knows something is very wrong and thinks my mom is totally justified in her feelings. So comparing to the previous story, at least in this story, the guy paid more attention to the feelings and just the concerning voice coming out from his woman, unlike the previous guy who lost 2 women and he wasn't willing to listen either of them. And that bothered me. That bothers me. But this guy, thankfully, even though not immediately, but after a while, he was like, "Hey, maybe I should listen to my wife. Maybe she's right."
I bet he doesn't either.
She didn't what?
I said, I bet he doesn't snore either.
Yeah, and I bet his wife doesn't use Murphy's oil. Okay. Well, we fast forward a few weeks, maybe even a month. It is a normal light like any other. My parents are asleep in their room, and my brother is sleeping in his room. In the middle of the night, my mom suspects it's 2, 3 a.m., so it's the witching hour. But she can't be certain, because she was all drowsy. And at this point, my parents wake up to a huge thud. Immediately, my parents jump up and hear my brother is awake calling for them. They rush into his room, and he's laying down in the very corner of the room on the floor with his blanket perfectly taut and draped on him, as though he was tucked into bed, but on the ground at least 5 feet from his bed. Yeah, that's odd.
Yeah.
My parents pick him up and ask him what happened. He responds, pointing to the closet. It pushed me. The fox pushed me. My dad opens the closet, rifles through everything looking for an animal, and of course finds nothing. So this is weird, right? I would agree with you. Yeah, it is super weird. I would think your family already had tons of weird stuff, and I can't think of anything weirder. But you guys are like win the Nobel Prize of weirdness for today. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's true. Why would a 3-year old say such a thing? Well, in this moment, my parents remembered the last name of the old man that sold them the house, Fox. As I was saying from the beginning, Shaun, do you remember? This guy maybe seemed so nice and he wanted to do something, but maybe he was a creep in a spiritual way. I don't know. Look, so the fox pushed the little boy, and the last name of the owner of the house was Fox.
Yeah.
My brother was in the middle of the room, put to bed on the floor. Well, after all the dust has settled, my parents started renovating. They wanted to put carpet in my brother's room. So they tore up all the tile and flooring stuff. And to quote my dad, right where your brother was laying on the fox night, there was a blood stain. Mrs. Fox had died in the house in my brother's room. She was very ill, but fell while trying to replace a light in the room.
Wow.
Wow.
And then you've got that light flickering in the basement.
Yeah. Wow, this house. Whew. Okay. I thought I was getting more to discern and perceive what was happening, but this gives like data or evidence pointing in a different way. Okay, so okay, let me continue reading because there's another part. She titled it Reconciliation. I kid you not, my parents freaked out on this. There were too many things going on, so there were more things happening, but she didn't mention. My mom refused to let herself and my brother stay in the house, especially since she was now pregnant with my sister. My dad decided he was going to take care of this. He was like, yeah, let me man up. Again, he's not a superstitious man. He's a doctor and a man of logic. However, he knew there was something going on with his house. A night or two after the Fox incident, my dad sat down in the living room and had a talk with the spirit of the house. Listen, so the doctor, the logical man, the Sherlock Holmes of the house, came to talk with the spirit of the house. I don't know how smart this was because all he was supposed to do was praying to Jesus, but I guess he was not a man of faith. So the doctor said this to the spirit. I don't know if you're real. I don't know if you're Mrs. Fox, but I do know this. You're going to stop. We are a peaceful and loving family. If you're Mrs. Fox, your husband would be ashamed of you. He wanted us to have our family here because he knew you would want us to. Just as you raise your family here, I want to do the same. Man, this was a very honest plea from Father's heart. I have to salute him for doing. I'm not saying that what he did was godly, but what he did was honest because that was the best for him, not knowing God, what he could have done. And he wasn't ashamed to say, oh, I'm a doctor, yet look how silly I am. He was like, I'm the man of the house and I'm going to try to talk to this entity. So even though it's not biblical, but I love that he was so honest and vulnerable and just saying, trying to talk senses into this entity, if that's even possible. So again, he said to Miss Fox, just as you raise your family here, I want to do the same. You may stay here as long as you like. You cannot do this to us anymore. I'm sorry for your passing and for your pain, but you cannot take it on us. You cannot take it out on us. My wife is pregnant and you're causing her loads of stress. You even went after my son. This will stop, or I will seek out someone who will make it stop. Thank you. Good night. Wow. This was like writing a letter to someone. That's how I'm feeling. Like it wasn't a prayer. it wasn't a discussion because it was one way. I feel like this was like someone trying to put their own thoughts, and then even though if they were not sure that there is someone else listening to that, they're like, I'm still gonna read my thoughts or say them loud just in case if it can help my family. After this, nothing bad happened to my family again. Wow, so he was able to talk some senses into the ghost. Okay. So far, let me see, it's not over. There were no lights, knocks, no foxes. But, and this is the craziest thing ever, there was one final thing. In a wooden cabinet that my mom bought at a neighborhood garage sale a few days after they moved into the house, there was a card, an anniversary card, and it said, Happy anniversary, so and so, signature Fox. Oh man, I got goosebumps. I seriously got goosebumps. Oh my gosh. This was found 2 days after my parents' anniversary in June, after they moved the cabinet to the other side of the room. They had owned the cabinet since they moved into the house and had not seen the old man since they bought the house. Since they bought the house either. I think this is not a properly formulated sentence. My parents have moved many times over the years and lost the card inevitably. We still have the cabinet. It sits in our cabin to this day.
Wow.
Shaun, what a story. So first I was pro this old guy, then I accused him wrongly, and now I'm like, okay, it wasn't his fault. He wasn't a creep. It was his wife that died in an accident trying to change a light bulb, and in a way was haunting the new family. And then when the man finally stood up to be the man of the house and talked to the ghost, it obeyed, it listened, even though it didn't have to. He didn't refute it or command or rebuke it in the name of Jesus. He was just trying to talk like you and I are talking, and it worked because for years and decades after that, they never had more haunting again.
Right.
Again, this is one of those examples that, like, if you would ask me, where is that in the Bible? I cannot open a page and show it to you, but somehow it worked. Like,
Yeah.
what can we offer as an explanation, Shaun? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely is weird. He doesn't address it as a dead person. He just says, I don't even know if you're real, but you're done. And if you don't quit, we're gonna get rid of you. So it's not like he's assuming that it's a woman, a passed on woman. He could be speaking to whatever the entity is that's causing all of the problems. And so I don't know. Maybe if it was a demon, maybe the demon believed him. Uh, if it wasn't a demon, if it was some sort of a poltergeist activity, maybe the dad stepping up and taking initiative would have calmed down everything, because most of the time poltergeist activity happens in uh, teenage girls. And so maybe dad being gone for so long, being away, only there on Sundays, maybe dad showing initiative and saying, this is my family. Maybe that calmed everything down. Could also be another crazy theory that hauntings are not spirits at all, but they are cryptids. And so it's some sort of an invisible creature that you can't see, but it's a flesh and blood creature that moves stuff around. And I think that what was that? Spiderwick Chronicles, where they have the little what is it, a brownie? And he's like, they can't see him, and so they think there's like a spirit like throwing stuff around. And it turns out just to be like this little guy, and it's his house, and he's the caretaker of it.
I don't know about that, but I know if I would have beard like you, I wouldn't be scared. I'm like, just take look of my beard and be scared. Behold, behold the great beard anointed with Murphy's oil.
Murphy's oil, glory.
Shaun, we had so much fun. I know before we went live, because again, you were tired, I was tired. We also had thunderstorms for over an hour in Chicago, so we were late. So like, hey, let's do this episode for like hour and 15, hour 20, maybe, just maybe hour and 30 max. We almost came to 2 hours, and I have to say I really enjoyed and it was so fun and funny and educational and paranormal and biblical and all of these things that a good story and a good Tuesday night or every night should combine all these different aspects. I want to thank you for jumping in when our supposed guest, the Russian author, deacon, teacher, God knows how many titles he has. Nicholas Cotter couldn't come last week, couldn't come yesterday either, so we postponed that uh, until he's able to come. So actually, this episode for everyone watching this belongs chronologically to the last week. This Sunday we will go live again, and we'll have another guest where we'll be talking about the Divine Council worldview and the book he wrote. But we also want to go through the practical part. How is this man teaching the Divine Council worldview in his church? So it will be theological, but it will be also practical. So we're preparing. I'm not done preparing completely, but we have something very fun and very good and very educational and super solid biblically, to be honest, for this Sunday. I will announce this episode in due time. But again, even though this episode came in a very unorthodox time, Tuesday night, I usually work at this time. So I don't record throughout the weekdays. But thank you once again, Shaun, for jumping in and filling in, when it comes to, this episode. And again, this episode belongs in the last week. So this was episode 70. I would just invite everyone to keep being open-minded. I'm not saying believe in everything. I'm not saying be superstitious. I'm not saying be naive. I'm not saying none of those things. I'm saying pray through the Holy Spirit to God to discern things for you, to teach you new things, accepting humility that there's so many things that God didn't reveal to us directly in the Bible, but there could be given to us through the natural revelation. We just don't understand it fully, and that's fine. And also, please, in a way that you can subscribe, share the videos. I'm not asking for money, but I'm also asking for money in a way. If you can bless the channel, we spend money on books on the internet. You see the clothes and the outfit Shaun and I have. All of these things cost. We, sponsor ourselves. But in the meantime, also, spread the links and click like and comment, because that also helps us. So that's also a way that you can be a blessing to this channel, and also pray for us and for our families. You don't know sometimes what we go through, yet we are dedicated there to make episode every week. Shaun, you have all the time you want to for concluding thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's an honor and a privilege to be able to come on and help you. And I love the eerie encounters. Yeah, I'm really grateful to be able to do this. I'm super thankful to be a part of this ministry, to be able to watch Nico's ministry grow. He's one of the hardest working guys in the YouTube industry. No, I'm just so thankful for everything he does. I'm thankful for him allowing me to have a platform to be able to share my weird, crazy thoughts. You know what I mean? But yeah, no, I totally agree with him that we're not asking you to go just completely abandon the Christian worldview and everything that's been built. We are just asking you to maybe take a minute and see if there's room in your Christian worldview to account for all of the experiences that these people have, because at the end of the day, all these experiences amount to a form of evidence of something. We don't know exactly what, but it's evidence for something. And if you can't make room for that in your worldview, then you have a truncated worldview that doesn't explain all of the evidence. And if you have a theory or a worldview that doesn't best explain all of the evidence, it is quickly going to be abandoned for something new. And we know that Christianity is true. We know that it is not just true, it is fractally true. It is true in every way that it can be true. And so there should be nothing that we are afraid of. there will always be questions that we can't answer, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be asking those questions. And so, no, I invite you to keep asking questions, to keep pursuing Christ, and to like, share, and subscribe, to help our brother out, and to grow the channel.
Thank you. And in the meantime, don't forget to have the oil of the Holy Spirit and Murphy's oil by your bed. You never know when you can, if you will need it to 2 or 3 in the morning in the witching hour. You just take the Murphy's oil and sprinkle it on a demon. It works.
It works best if you put it on your beard and then you spurge, in the room. Yeah.
Double blessing.
Double blessing. That's right.
Shaun, you're like one of those priests in RPG games. When you select a character, I usually like knights and paladins, those noble characters. There's always like a monk or a priest. So I would imagine someone like you, just longer beard, and his blessing. He can spank people, but he can also bless them with his beard. Man, that should totally integrate your character in one of those Christian RPG video games.
Amen.
See, I'm giving all these ideas for free. It's for free. Good guy on this amazing podcast. Okay, I love you guys. I'll see you Sunday. Thank you, Shaun. All of you, including you, Shaun, have a blessed remaining of this week. Love God. Be curious. Be intellectually honest to yourself when it comes to these vague supernatural things. Don't just throw it into a rubbish category that I used to do before and just say, oh, it's nonsense, it doesn't exist. Many things don't exist, but some things God allows in his sovereignty to exist. How they affect us, that's up to us to research. God bless and have a good night.